Remember that the insights shared today could very well be the catalyst for transforming your business's trajectory down the line.
Today, he will shed light on what it takes to build your business into an attractive acquisition target for a buyer.
We still were very large. We did 30 billion of deals in 6 years.
The e-commerce business owners, even if we're just getting started, how can we look at it as an asset and really rise the value of that asset?
You know, there are a lot of companies that I've seen that I would call them really good product companies, but I wouldn't call them brands.
Some of the strategies that Jason shares today could be the things that increase the multiple that you're able to sell your business for down the line. Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked Podcast. I'm Lewis Smith, the founder of Dropship Unlocked, and with me is our client success coach, James Eardley. Now, when we're not recording the podcast episodes, we're running our own e-commerce businesses and helping aspiring entrepreneurs launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. Keen to build your own 6 or even 7-figure business? My book, The Home Turf Advantage, is your blueprint for launching a profitable online store. Grab your copy at htabook.com today and let's get you started. Now sit back, relax, and let's unlock your potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast. In today's episode, it's a pleasure to welcome Jason Somerville, an expert in scaling e-commerce businesses strategically for the most lucrative possible exit. Jason brings nearly 2 decades of experience in guiding companies through increasing their asset value, mergers, acquisitions, and beyond.
Absolutely, Lewis. Really fascinating conversation that we're sharing now with Jason, because his involvement in developing strategies to prepare businesses for high-value exits makes this conversation, I think, essential for any e-commerce entrepreneur that's ever toyed with the idea of selling their business for a large multiple at the end of their journey, on their e-commerce journey. So today he will shed light on what it takes to build your business into an attractive acquisition target for a buyer, and how to maximize your company's valuation in a competitive market.
And it's not just about growing your business either. I love the way that Jason talks today about strategically scaling your business with an eye towards eventually selling your business down the line. So as we dive into this discussion, remember that the insights shared today could very well be the catalyst for transforming your business's trajectory down the line. So even if you think I'm not ready to exit my business yet or to sell my business, pay close attention, because some of the strategies that Jason shares today could be the things that increase the multiple that you're able to sell your business for down the line. So get ready to explore deep into the strategies that make a business irresistible to investors. Let's jump into it.
So today we're delighted to be joined by Jason Somerville, who is an entrepreneur and an expert in investment banking, known for his strategic prowess in terms of capital markets and mergers and acquisitions. So, Jason, first of all, thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights on scaling e-commerce businesses to their full potential.
Thanks, James. Happy to be here, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Let's dive into this. Very excited about this conversation. First of all, nice broad question to introduce yourself to everyone listening in and watching. Let us know a little bit about your journey and how you've now got yourself to this place working with GW Partners.
Sure, man. Yeah, it might be a 3-hour podcast if I go too long here. So I'll give you the short version. I've had a 20-year career, right, in basically investment banking and being an entrepreneur and kind of in various forms. I started as a traditional institutional investment banker. I worked for Bank of America right after college. So got started doing very large capital markets transactions for Fortune 500 companies. Then moved actually to run capital markets for a hedge fund in Miami. Did that for about 7 years, and then became an entrepreneur. And I think that my sort of career has gotten increasingly entrepreneurial as it has gone along, starting in the large corporate bank, and then working my way to being my own business owner. And so I kind of left finance, for a few years just to be a business owner, operator, entrepreneur. And then we kind of about 7 years ago combined those worlds of being an entrepreneur with being an investment banker and starting our firm GW Partners to help founders basically think about, plan for, and execute on exits of their companies.
Amazing. I think that is going to be incredibly valuable today, speaking to founders and soon to be founders on this episode about how we can make the most of the assets that we're building, these e-commerce businesses. So yeah, I'm just fascinated by that combination of incredibly corporate style job in a finance world to then jumping out and doing things on your own. Did you have that itch inside you to become an entrepreneur while you were in these jobs?
Well, I didn't have it in the beginning. I mean, I think, first of all, I think anybody who goes into investment banking kind of naturally is a little bit entrepreneurial. I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. Nobody in my family was a business owner. Everyone was just kind of normal employees their whole lives. So I didn't really have that exposure. I wish I did, now in the past, but, I won't, write to family members and blame them for not starting businesses and maybe slowing down my my timeline. But yeah, I mean, I think as I got into that large corporate world, pretty soon after there, I kind of decided this wasn't really for me. I didn't really enjoy that environment that much. I knew I didn't want to do that my whole life. And so I started to, inch my way towards that entrepreneurial, kind of line in a hedge fund, and moving from a large company, public traded bank, to a hedge fund, which is a private. We still were very large. We did 30 billion of deals in 6 years, but kind of one step towards that. And then after that, I was like, okay, now I feel really good maybe going on my own and becoming my own boss and being a business owner. So yeah, the itch got more and more, I'd say, prevalent as those first, what was that, about 10 years of my career went on. And I was completely ready. Like when I left that hedge fund position, I was ready to go for sure.
I bet you were just watching all day these big brand owners and founders exiting and selling their businesses. That probably give you an idea of the potential of having your own thing, your own business, creating your own asset. So were you always involved in the final stage of businesses? Was that when you'd always get involved in those jobs initially in the investment banking and the hedge fund that you were working for?
Not always final stage. I mean, sometimes what we were doing was just, like I said, more capital markets oriented. So we were raising capital either through debt or equity issuance. So a lot of times that's more related to just ongoing capital needs. Sometimes it's part of a merger, like for example, or a leverage buyout. So that was pretty common in what we were doing too. For example, I mean, your audience may or may not be aware that in a leverage buyout, it's really just, I'm buying a company for $1,000 and I'm going to put up, 200 of equity. And I'm going to borrow 800, in debt. That's a very leveraged, purchase of that business. We would be responsible a lot of times for raising that debt for those buyouts. So it was kind of a combination. But then, again, as I got sort of closer to that line of wanting to go out on my own, that was very much what I was targeting. I was like, I believe I can either start or acquire businesses, grow them and make them much more valuable and sell them. And that was sort of the basic idea. And that's kind of been the theme of what I've been doing now for the last, really, I guess, going on 11 years at this point.
Amazing. A very, very valuable skills to have in terms of knowing the ground rules or the sort of principles that you always apply to businesses to increase them in value. So we'd love to dive into that today so we can understand us as e-commerce business owners, even if we're just getting started, how can we look at it as an asset and really rise the value of that asset? So we'll start off just defining some terms, I think, just to really understand what we're talking about today. We use terms like capital markets, M&A, strategic advisory board, all of this sort of topics. Could you delve into sort of, especially mergers and acquisition and the final stage of a business? Can you dive into the specifics of those sort of terms?
Sure. Yeah. I think so starting with just mergers and acquisitions, right? I think more often than not in the world of business, you see acquisitions much more than you see mergers. So let's just let's sort of break those two apart from them. But they tend to be in the same general category because usually it involves, a business or a buyer acquiring an entire business or two businesses that it exists separately becoming one business, right? That's a merger. An acquisition would be either a company or an individual purchasing an entire, business. That would be an acquisition, sort of to keep it super simple there. But the idea is, when you're looking at a business and you start looking at the fundamentals, well, what is a business? Like, first of all, like, what even is it, right? So if you ask somebody that question, you might get a lot of different answers. I mean, in one way, a business is a legally established, entity or operation. But then we start to say, well, what makes up a business? What are the components of a business, right? It's the people, it's the products, it's the intellectual property, it's the customers and the ability to access, essentially from a financial standpoint, cash flow by offering goods or services to an end customer. So that sort of is a business. And then, when you look at, well, how would you value that thing we're calling a business, right? And why would I want to buy that thing we're calling a business? And how do I figure out what's a good price for that thing I'm calling a business? And so that's really what mergers and acquisitions are all about is really that. It's sort of looking at this thing we're calling a business, breaking it down into its fundamental components, understanding it, and then predicting its future, right? That's really, and that's probably the last thing, is the biggest part of it. Is anytime someone's wanting to buy a business or looking to merge, they're trying to predict the future, and they're saying, I think the future is going to look a certain way, and therefore I'm willing to pay a certain price to own that future. Does that make sense?
It does. You almost have to be a bit of a fortune teller in a way that you've got to see the future, but you're able to read the future, I guess, from experience of seeing similar businesses or understanding where the market is going. Is that how you'd inform where the future is going?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of those things, right? First of all, when someone is acquiring a business and they're trying to value it or try to predict its future, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of experience with that particular market if you have a lot of experience understanding business and how to analyze a particular company and analyze its market and be able to look at available data to then use to try to project its future. But it definitely helps. What you see more often than not is when you have an acquisition, the company or person buying the business has real experience in that market and is therefore very well equipped to try and project the future. And as we all know, there's not really any substitute for experience. I mean, intelligence can help you a lot if you don't have experience, but it definitely can't be a true substitute for it.
Exactly. You've seen things before and you understand that certain patterns will play out again, no doubt, when you're trying to value a business. So to bring us up to date with GW Partners, I think your role, you see, is it a consulting role that you do now alongside businesses that are looking to exit? Is that right?
We do, yeah. So all our business is always built around, or has always been built around this idea of the future sale as kind of the ultimate goal. So when company owners work with us, that is always part of the equation. Now, we can get involved 1 year, 2 years away from when that event might occur. And it's, we will be sitting there beside the founder, helping them design the plan for how to get to their goal. So and we can keep it super simple here. Let's say I have a company that I want to sell for $10 million in 2 years. That's my goal, right? What do I do to create that? If maybe I started it 3 years ago and it's at a certain level now, what do I need to do to get there? And then our job is because we always say we have the answers to the test, right? That's one of the things we bring to the table is, given all of our experience, we can look at a company and say, here are the things that an acquirer is going to like. Here are the things an acquirer is not going to like. How do we enhance the things they're going to like? And how do we maybe either completely get rid of or, reduce the things they don't like? And in the context wrapped in all that, of course, is the reality of operating that particular business. So, I mean, anybody can go to a whiteboard and put a wish list on the whiteboard that may not really reflect what's reality for a particular company. So it obviously has to be, couched in that. But yeah, that's what we do. And then we lead that founder through that process and then ultimately through the sale process. So, anybody that in the audience that happens to have some experience with, I'd say, like middle market and institutional M&A processes, like what an investment banker does and how they market a business, that's very much how we market a business. So, there's a very sort of, I'd say, tried and true approach that, the best institutions, best investment banks use when trying to market a business, that's the approach we use.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, I can see how much value that would provide to a founder, especially they're brand new and they've never sold a business before. I mean, selling a business isn't necessarily common for people, but it is a goal often. So I'd love to play this out then, Jason, together, because I've got my primary e-commerce business. Sounds like what you described there. So I've been running it now for about 3 years, and say I decided, okay, we're at a position now where we did about 600k revenue last year, about 50k a month consistently, the higher months at certain times of year up to 70k. And say I came to you, Jason, with the aim, look, let's try and get this business to a point where it's a saleable asset in 2 years for £10 million or dollars. What sort of questions would you be asking me, or where would you see the biggest opportunities for growing that value?
Yeah, so the first thing we would do, we'd probably start with the idea. So a lot of people would think we'd start with the numbers. We don't, right? I think the first thing we start with would be, what is it that you're offering in the market? What is your, I'd say, unique kind of proposition? What is the value that you're bringing? What we always say, why do you have a reason to exist, right? What's your reason to exist? Are you solving a problem? Are you bringing a new angle to, a product or service? Ultimately, what is it that your customers really like about what you do, right? So that tends to be the DNA of any business, and any successful business is there's something there that they're doing that some part of the world appreciates and values. That's why they have customers, right? So then we start with, well, how do we take that and, scale it? And is there kind of a really big enough addressable market for you to scale into? Like, is the niche so small that it would be very hard to scale it, right? Or is there enough of a potential market? So that's usually where we start, right? Just more of that conceptually. What's the special sauce?
Got it. And just to dive into that, because it's the first question you ask, it's interesting because I went immediately to the numbers, and I thought you'd be asking me all about numbers, total addressable market, email list size, those sort of things. So why is it so important that the founder is very clear on the exact value that they bring to the market?
Well, I think there's two reasons. One, I think operationally, it is what keeps you, I think, laser focused and pointed in the right direction, right? Because as a founder owner, it's very hard to get distracted with day to day, just like because you're wearing 1,000 hats, and I got, and you're just trying to, operate a lot of times. You're just trying to run the hamster wheel, right? And just keep it going. But that becomes really your North Star of how you navigate, right? And everything should be almost informed, right, by that core principle. And if you don't think you're building something that has some of that in it, then I would say one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to build a business that maybe has a decent cash flow, but probably isn't going to be very sellable, right? Or you're going to build a business that will ultimately fail at some point, right? Because any business that doesn't really have, I'd say, some unique, approach, it may exist for a while, but usually it will cease to exist at some point, right? And that's just the natural business cycle, that most things. Because, to your point you made earlier, if anyone who sells a company, like 90% of those people will only sell one company. And 98% of all businesses that get started will never sell. So you got to remember, but now there's millions and millions and millions of businesses that get started, right? So if you want to be in that sort of group, what we're talking about here is very key to that. And as we get more into what acquirers really value, that's a big part of it, right? What's my special sauce here, and how can I scale that?
Amazing. It's amazing how value can be literally added, in terms of the hundreds of thousands, millions, and beyond that, to just the words and the key value and the brand that you've built. Because I think I immediately would go logical side of thinking, how many sales are you making? What's the total addressable market? And it's always very number based. But yeah, I'm just interested. It's actually quite qualitative in terms of, have you got a clear brand identity? So just digging into that main point that we've raised there, for people that are getting started and perhaps they haven't quite figured out what their unique selling point would be, Do they need to speak to more customers, or how would you advise a brand get really clear on what their unique point is?
Yeah, well, I would advise, to just when you're doing your research in the beginning, when you have your idea, because a lot of times with founders, it'll be a spark, right? It'll be something that comes to them. They're exposed to, or, and all of a sudden like, oh, wait a minute, here's something that I think might really work. Like, this seems like there's something there, right? I've noticed that's over the years working with so many entrepreneurs, is the sparks come from sometimes the strangest places, right? You don't know. So then, and when you take that spark and you're trying to form a real business plan around it, this is an area that you want to spend a lot of time before sort of diving into, right? Into going ahead and starting the business. So I would say a lot of it is research oriented up front. Like, if the market you're planning to go into, really go to school on it before you really decide to move forward, and make sure that your business plan as you're building it has this at the sort of center of it. And if it doesn't, like I said, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs over the years that have built businesses that actually, they cash flow pretty well. They support their lifestyle, they enjoy the business, and that's great. It just likely, a lot of those just won't be sellable. They'll just be nice, cash flowing businesses.
Got it. So if somebody has the goal of a nice cash flow business, then that's okay, and they can just run that all the time. But if they have the goal in the mind of having a saleable asset, then I guess you have to look at your business differently, especially when you're first starting. At what point would you say that people need to start thinking about how they set up their company? Is it something that you need to do from day one? So start with the end in mind, or can it come down the line?
The recommendation would always be start with the end in mind, right? For sure. But I also understand that, I've had this experience myself. A lot of times you can have a very well laid plan and things just take twists and, they take twists and turns. Like, you find, you weren't quite expecting what happened, and then you had to pivot and you had to adapt. So ideally you would begin, like, in a perfect world, you build your business plan. The goal in the business plan is to sell the company in X amount of years. The whole plan is built leading up to that event, and it all goes exactly as you laid out, right? However, the chances that that's going to happen exactly are not very high. So we definitely work with people all the time that didn't start thinking about this until well into their journey. And look, is it the end of the world? Of course not. I mean, you could come in. It just means, though, you might need a little bit longer if you need to sort of steer the ship a little, maybe clean up whether it's legal or how you've done accounting or how you set up your company structure and how you set up your ownership. There can be some cleanup stuff that has to happen that would, be needed in order to make a sale really possible. And you just may need a little extra time, in order to fix it.
In order to bring things back. Yeah. So some things for people that are getting started and very new, and they're in a great position because they can potentially build their business with the idea of selling it in the future. Are there some key things that they should be doing in terms of the structure, like getting accountants on board early? Are there some things that come to your mind straight away that you'd advise people do from the start?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say, first of all, again, we'll start with legal structure. Be very thoughtful about how you're setting your company up, and if you have multiple owners, how the ownership structure is created. Your operating agreement that you put in place, needs to be very very well thought through. It needs to have all the typical contingencies and eventualities that would normally be structured in there. That's really important. So number one. Number two, I'll give you a good example. So here in the U.S., we have this thing called a qualified, it's QSBS is the qualified small business exemption. And so, but it only, if you sell, it's up to 20 million, I think now. So if you, for a sale up to 20 million, you can have the sale be free of capital gains tax, right? However, the only way you can get that is if you have a C Corp. So you have to structure your company. So if you're wanting to take advantage of that tax benefit, you need to establish your company as a C Corp. If you don't, and you do it later, there's a 5-year minimum period where you have to be a C Corp. I've seen people do that all the time where they're like, oh, wait a minute, they want to exit in the next 1 to 2 years. They find out about this tax benefit they didn't know about. They were established as an LLC, and they're like, oh man, I can convert to a C Corp, but then I got to wait 5 years now. So that's like a nice little, I'd say, example there. So all of that, operating agreement, corp structure, all of that needs to be really well thought out in the beginning. Again, books and records, accounting, I think it's something people overlook a lot. They just assume I'll just do it at once a year when it's time to do my taxes or whatever. No, it's really, especially in e-commerce, it's not expensive to have a good bookkeeper. Just make sure your accounts are very, very tidy and well structured. It's going to be very important. So those are, kind of some of the real foundational things. Also, I mean, I've told this to so many entrepreneurs. I learned this lesson the hard way myself, which is however much capital you think you're going to need, you're going to need more. I promise. So, like whatever you think the plan is, I mean, it's we have a joke here in the US where if someone like a contractor who's going to build you a house, whatever amount of time they tell you, you just double it. Just what it's it. So 3 months, okay, it'll be 6 months. Same kind of thing. I have that same general rule with entrepreneurs, which is however much capital you think you're going to need, double it, right? So because if you need access to that capital, right, it's lifeblood to the business.
Exactly. Yeah, it's similar over here in the UK with our contractors. Perhaps it's a global thing where you just need to expect things to cost twice as much and take twice as much time as what you're initially quoted. Interesting. So for people that are building e-commerce businesses, because I know you advise people, I assume you advise different types of companies, and there's certain rules around e-commerce where if an e-commerce business owner like myself came to you and asked about scaling my business to be ready for an exit one day, is there certain things that you'd say to an e-commerce business owner that might not apply to other businesses, or is it quite general for every business type?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about a product business within e-commerce, yeah, I think there are a few, right? I think one is, let's talk first about product, right? I think from a product, we'll call it sourcing and development perspective, I think one, you want to be very thoughtful about your sourcing and how you're protected from an intellectual property perspective, right? And are you just taking kind of, product off the shelf from, a manufacturer, maybe making a couple mods to it, and really, there's nothing really protecting your business? I think a lot of times with e-commerce companies, product companies, when they start, it feels a little bit daunting to want to go that route of whether it's getting patents or doing specific product design. They just want to get started. It's cheaper to just, work with a supplier and maybe take something they've already developed. I just would say what I've seen too many times is, people didn't actually plan to be successful. So if you plan to be successful and you grow your company, one of the main things that a buyer is going to look at with an e-commerce business is what is unique about your products and what is going to stop a supplier from just selling your products themselves or selling them to a different brand. And then all of a sudden, there's really nothing different about what you're offering versus what someone else is offering. That's happened a lot where they got really successful on the back of something that is very hard. There's no real moat around it. So I think that's one thing I would offer. I think another thing I would offer is, when you think about building your customer acquisition strategy, I'd say especially in today's environment, and that's something in e-commerce it's changing so rapidly all the time that I think people kind of dive in, whether it's kind of, hey, I'll just go the meta route, or if I'm on Amazon, obviously I can just do traditional kind of PPC, just, put money there and just be pretty good at that. I think that you should plan on trying to drive as much organic traffic as you possibly can, because that is where a lot of value, kind of the owned media, earned media type of traffic is much, much more valued by acquirers than paid media. So on an acquisition, customer acquisition basis, of course, you want scale. And a lot of times, look, Meta is still one of the best ways to scale an e-commerce business, right, with Meta ads. I'm not saying don't do it. What I am saying, though, is what I see a lot of e-commerce businesses now having to deal with is they build their business entirely on the back of Meta, and they're trying to now pivot because their acquisition costs have gotten out of control, and they're trying to build a more organic strategy. And it's very hard to do when you're already in the middle of it, right? So I would say begin with that in mind, to be very thoughtful about how you're going to build your funnels and how you're going to build your traffic, especially if you want to sell your company, right? Because it will pay off in spades later if you've built a really good, multi-funnel traffic strategy, as opposed to being very dependent on one channel. So I give you 100 more, but I don't want to bore you. So I'll pause there for that for now.
That's perfect. Yeah, no, these are great criteria in terms of to what extent are we on these scales of exclusivity with suppliers, or how diverse is your acquisition channels? And am I right in thinking it's not a case of, yes, you've got a diverse marketing strategy, therefore you can sell, and if not, you can't. It's more so, to what extent are you diverse? And the more you are, the more valuable the business. So it's like a scale that would increase the value.
Yeah, it's not binary. That's correct. It's really a scale. And I mean, look, one thing I probably should have said at the beginning is, we're always working from the idea of how do I optimize a sale, to the very top, right? How do I create the most valuable exit? And then you sort of work backwards, right? And say, that doesn't mean there isn't, let's say in a particular situation, it's like, okay, well, that's not going to be a top of the market exit. Doesn't mean there still wouldn't be an exit, or even a nice exit, right? We're always working from that point of view and saying, well, what would get us to the top of the market? We use a phrase a lot we just say top quartile a lot. Like, that's what we're shooting for. How do we get into the top quartile? So we're up there in that top 25% of exits when it comes to, value among a peer group.
Fantastic. So we'd love to be building businesses that are going to be in the top quartile. Sounds like we're aligned with your mission as well. So we talked about a nice diverse marketing strategy with lots of different ways to acquire customers, primarily organic being a stronger base than if you were purely going from paid channels. And then also with the type of businesses that we run e-commerce, we partner with multiple suppliers who are also partnered with other brands. So if we can sign exclusivity deals with these suppliers, then again, that's going to put us in a higher position. So those are the first two criteria. There are probably hundreds, like you say, Jason, but are there any more criteria, as well as the sourcing and the acquisition channels, other ways that we can really think about, like, the real criteria that makes a big difference to the value?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would say right now, probably the biggest one is this idea of brand, right? And, there are a lot of companies that I've seen that I would call them really good product companies, but I wouldn't call them brands, right? And again, going back to this idea of top quartile, brand, it's funny because the word brand is a subjective word, right? If you ask 10 people, what does it mean? What does the word brand mean? You're going to get 10 answers. I would say that brand, the way we define brand is, you have earned the right to have the second, third, fourth conversation with the customer. That is sort of the best way to define brand. It's not the only way. I think it's the most objective way. And I think there's also a little bit of, and unfortunately, this isn't going to be all that helpful, but it is the truth, which is a little bit about brands. You kind of know it when you see it, right? Have you established some kind of connection with a certain group of people where what you're doing really resonates with them? It doesn't have to be that there's some larger mission that people are getting. I mean, that's one way. But it's really being able to establish a connection with a group of people that says, you know what, I really like this company, not just because I think their products are great, but I like what they stand for. I like their vibe. I like who they are. They seem like, maybe they're like me, or maybe they're just people that seem people I want to support with my money, and that's what acquirers also are really, really looking for. And in e-commerce, it's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you're just trying to chase your scale early, right? Because it's a little bit easier to scale if you just focus purely on product. A lot of times brand building it's longer term. It can be expensive. You don't get immediate return on your investment. And so it's very easy to fall more into that kind of product execution trap and sort of neglect the idea of building brand.
Yeah, but brands, they're sticky, aren't they? It's the sort of thing that stays around longer than how well your ads are performing. If people resonate with your brand, it's something that's going to stick. So I'm putting myself in the shoes of an acquirer of a business. They'd want to know that what they're buying into is something that's sticky and it's going to stick around. So is that why brand is so important, because of the longevity that it provides?
It is, yeah. It's the longevity, and it's also that, like you said, the stickiness of the consumer base that supports it, right? And also that's going to tell their friends, and you're going to get, you're going to get that sort of organic kind of grassroots type support, which, every company, especially consumer product company, ultimately needs, right, to become, a lot larger. I mean, you at some point need your customers to be selling your products for you, at least, on a large scale, and telling their friends, hey, I bought this thing from this really cool company. You should definitely try it. And as you know, that sort of multiplies exponentially the longer you go on and the better you're able to actually execute on that kind of brand mission.
Absolutely. So in terms of a company, perhaps they're early on in their journey, but they know that an exit strategy would be their ideal exit from a business, a nice lump sum at the end for the work they've put in over the years. What should they expect from that process? Is it going to be a case of months and years of putting things together to expect an acquisition to go through, or are there certain ways that we can reduce that time?
You mean from startup, or from when they start thinking about potentially selling? Which starting point?
So from when they've already up and running, they've already clearly got market fit because they're profitable and they're generating some money, but they want to put things in place to sell at that stage.
Yeah, I would say that, a typical process, like if a company is, I'd say, ready to be put to market, and there's not a lot of work to do to sort of get it ready, that's usually a 4 or 5, 6 month type process, right? From start to finish. Now, if there is some stuff, that needs to be cleaned up, or maybe the company right now wouldn't be valued at a level where the owner would be willing to sell, then yeah, I would say, 1 to 2 years out from that. I think the minimum amount of time that we would say you should, if you're going to think about exiting, within 2 years, once you're in that 2-year window, is when you really need to start focusing on all things related to that sale and what might need to be done to prepare. So I would say that's a good rule of thumb, is kind of 2 years is a good timeline. And if you don't think, for whatever reason, as an owner, if you're like, well, this feels like something maybe in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, I would argue, look, good to begin, with the end in mind, but also you should just be focused on building a good business, right? I mean, you should have an advisor, that's sort of helping you understand, like, if you're going to go in a certain direction, it may be better or worse for an acquisition, almost just like, but more like a little bit of a coach, but not super, super intense at that point. Just focus on building a really good business. And then when you're maybe 2 years out, then you really start to like get intense with somebody, say like us, who comes alongside you and starts to put in the plan that's going to lead to that sale, like a very, very specific, focused plan.
Fantastic. And when you put a business to market, quite keen to hear how that works. Do you go onto a broker platform, or how does that? Where do you put a business up for sale, essentially?
Yeah, I think with us, our process being, I'd say, pretty traditional from an investment banking standpoint, we build our target lists as part of our kind of upfront work. So what we're doing is we're targeting, normally on a typical deal for us, it will be a few hundred acquirers that would be the best fit for a particular business. And then what you would do is you would start to socialize that opportunity early, especially with maybe I'll call it almost like the 40 or 50 that are bullseye, probably very, very, very best, most likely buyers. And then we would just start to have conversations, provide teaser information, let them know we have the deal coming, kind of start to build the market that way, build the excitement for the opportunity. And then when we launch, the process it's fairly auction style, right? We give people time to do their work with materials, and then we have bid dates and you sort of generate a lot of competition for the business. And then ultimately, that process leads to a LOI that leads to due diligence, and that ultimately leads to closing. So that's the process. I think, with some smaller companies, I think it likely is more appropriate to use maybe more platforms, out there that might be, kind of broader, almost like marketplaces, for digital, especially digital businesses. That works, I think, pretty well for, I'd say, businesses maybe under $1 million in value. I'd say once you start getting over $1 million, I think you really want to have a pretty dedicated process to your sale.
Amazing. Fantastic. Jason, it's been fascinating to learn about the acquisition process and what we can do as founders to really maximize the value of our businesses. And if somebody wants to speak more with you and learn more about the process of selling an e-commerce business, where would you recommend that they go?
Yeah, honestly, just have them contact me, man. I'm always happy to kind of talk to entrepreneurs and founders and give them a good idea and set them in the right direction of what they might need to do. Whether or not they become clients of the firm, great if they do. If they don't, that's also fine. And we just, as I think I told you early on and before we started the show, we started our firm because we felt like we wanted to bring a better level of service to founders in this space than they were getting before. And so our passion is just trying to help founders as much as we possibly can. So, my email is jason@gw.partners. Our website is www.gw.partners. And not .com, .partners. It's one of those. But yeah, have them contact me and I'll be happy to answer questions and hopefully provide some good advice.
Amazing. That's incredible. Thank you very much for that generous offer. I'll make sure to put the links in the description then for people to get in touch with you, Jason. Thanks again for your time today.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it, man.
Wow, that was a great exploration into the intricacies of strategic business scaling and preparing for a lucrative exit. Jason's perspective on building businesses, not only to operate them, but to actually thrive and attract substantial investor interest, has been incredibly enlightening.
Yeah, it was an amazing conversation. And I think Jason's approach to combining operations with strategic market positioning is something every e-commerce owner, no matter how far you are on your journey, should be very strongly considering integrating into their approach. Rather than just focusing on growth, it's about preparing your business to meet the standards and expectations of serious investors. That's where the huge amounts of life-changing wealth can come into the picture later on.
Exactly. It was great to really get into the shoes of a buyer so you can understand how to make your business attractive for them. And for people listening, and if you're interested in selling your business, this conversation wasn't just theoretical. We've got practical strategies that he shared for you to work on your business to get it ready for an exit. And it will make a difference to how you approach your business operations and strategic planning for the future. So I think it's clear it's about laying that solid foundation no matter what stage of your journey you're at with an e-commerce business, always having in mind what will make it appeal to obviously customers, but also to a potential acquirer down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're ready to take these strategies to heart and really integrate them into your business model, remember to check out the support available at GW Partners, as Jason mentioned. And also, don't forget that you can enhance your strategy with a comprehensive guide in my book, The Home Turf Advantage, which is available at htabook.com. So together, these resources provide a really powerful toolkit for any business owner aiming for the top of their industry.
Enjoying the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment or a review, and we might just feature it on an upcoming episode. Also, for detailed show notes and resources, head to dropshipunlocked.com/podcast.
If you found value from any episode of this podcast, please take just 10 seconds to leave us a quick 5-star review on your podcast app of choice. It helps us more than you could imagine, and who knows, you might just hear your comments on the show. Thanks for being part of our community. Your support helps us keep delivering a new episode every week.
Now it's time to answer a question that we've had in from a listener of the podcast. And remember, if you have a question and you want it to be answered by either Lewis or I, all you need to do is comment beneath a YouTube video version of an episode. So this question has come in from Benjamin Cherry, 8100, but he's actually asked a question for me this time. So I'll hand over the question to you, Lewis, to ask this one.
Yeah, roles are reversed today, right? So here's Benjamin's question. He said, a quick question I have for you, James. Did you ever face any resistance or challenges from suppliers due to your lack of experience and being young? I feel like once they pick up the phone and hear my young voice, they'll write me off and not take me seriously. Did you experience this?
Thank you for your question, Benjamin. And I remember before I got started, I was worried as well whether I'd be disadvantaged by my age. So I started with the business that I'm still running now when I was 23 years old. And when I got started, I personally have never felt disadvantaged by my age. Firstly, the reason why I think this is because suppliers are often not able to really tell your age through phone calls or emails. They might get a feel for it, but they've never made that explicit to me when I've spoke to them or even done video calls with them as well. What truly matters to them is whether you can serve them as a profitable sales channel for their business. Ultimately, they're in this industry to improve the sales, improve their business, and I think that is more important to them than the age of the person. As long as you get across that professionalism, that's really key. So my experience has definitely shown that suppliers are really just focusing on the business potential and less on the personal attributes of the people that are offering the service to them, and age comes into that bracket. So contrary to facing resistance, in fact, I think my youth has occasionally been viewed positively by suppliers who sort of commend the initiative and commend the attitude that you've got at a young age. And I think that'll be the same for you as well, Benjamin. It can often be seen as actually a sign of somebody that's really driven and innovative, which are qualities that would be admired by a potential new business partner. So something that really helped me, even at a young age when I got started, was that I had strong knowledge and mentorship in dropshipping, because that ensures that you are well prepared and confident in your interactions with suppliers. The only way that it will come across as an inexperienced or a person that's too young to do business with is if you've not prepared yourself. If you don't feel like you're ready to go, and if you haven't got the right training around you, then you might get exploited for not knowing what you should know, and then it might be related back to age. So I think it's important that you really get yourself prepared, so that if we are going to face anyone that is going to discriminate by age, then you overcome that with your professionalism and knowing exactly what you want to talk about. So when you go into a niche, learn a little bit about the language of the niche, learn about the dropshipping and the business model that you are putting in, and then when you have that conversation, you'll enjoy it and you won't get discriminated against at all. I think, as I say, the overarching message from this for you, Benjamin, and anyone at a young age looking to get started, is that suppliers and partners that you'll work with your business are primarily interested in results. So ultimately, what suppliers are looking for, and this is my message throughout my answer here, is that they're looking primarily for the results that you can bring them. And by having effective mentorship in place, will give you the confidence to speak with them confidently, no matter what age you are, so that you can deliver those results and have great partnerships with suppliers.
Thanks, James. A great question. And yeah, don't let those doubts hold you back, Benjamin.
Exactly. Don't hold yourself back. So it's time now to highlight a recent review that we've had in from a listener of the podcast. And a big thank you to Danielle Jackson 4664 for the YouTube comment. So thank you, Danielle. She has said, great information. I had to pause halfway through the video to go away and work on some of the tips before watching more. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for the review, Danielle. And before we go, I just have one tiny favour that I'd appreciate if you could help me with. Have you left us a review yet? If not, please do leave us a review. Wherever you're listening to this, it should take you about 10 seconds, but it does wonders for us and it's a big part of what drives us. So if you'd like us to continue with the podcast and you haven't left us a review yet, please take a moment to do so now, and hopefully we can read it out for you on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you're walking away with insights and inspiration.
To kickstart your e-commerce journey, grab a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage, at htabook.com. It's a distilled guide based on real experience to help you build your e-commerce venture.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more strategies and success stories. And if you like what you heard, a 5-star review would mean the world to us, and you might just get a shout out on an upcoming episode.
And finally, thank you for deciding to spend your time with us today. We can't wait to bring you more insights on the next episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast.